Then the box moved again. Had it been years already? This time, a man was staring back at me. I recognized him from the wedding. His eyes looked sad. I felt his tears fall and soak into my satin. I could feel his heavy heart. He put the lid back on the box, and I felt myself being carried away.
Hello and welcome, dear listeners, to Haunted UK Fiction, a sister podcast to The Haunted UK, which features original flash fiction, short stories, and novellas with paranormal themes. All stories you will hear were written by a collection of talented writers, authors, and storytellers, both independent and professional. In today's episode, we'll be reading The Wedding Dress by Melissa West, a story originally released on Melissa's podcast, The Skylark Bell. Melissa is a French-Canadian writer and musician living in the US. The Skylark Bell, which ran from 2021 to 2024, was a labour of love, written, produced, and narrated by Melissa, complete with its own soundtrack of original songs. Melissa has also written several episodes for Haunted UK and is co-creator and co-producer here at Haunted UK Fiction. Her influences include Daphne du Maurier, Wendy Webb, and spooky children's books from the 1980s and 1990s. So get comfortable, grab a little something to sip on, perhaps cuddle up under a blanket to help offset the chills coming your way. And let's dive into the story.
I remember all my parts. I remember when I was a bolt of lace, a bolt of satin, a drawstring bag of pearls, a string of elastic, a spool of thread. I remember how it felt when the woman brought all my parts together and began to cut and stitch. I remember how dedicated she was, how much love she poured into her craft, her steady hand cutting into the fabric, her foot pumping the pedal of the now antique sewing machine. I remember how she pinned my cut-out parts onto the dress form, stepping back to evaluate her work. Then, at the end, when she hand-sewed the pearls to my bodice and the satin-covered buttons in a row down my back. I started out as satin, pearls, and thread, and I became a wedding dress. I remember the look of satisfaction on her face when at last her work was done. Then came the girl. Her eyes lit up when she saw me. We became fast friends. With only minor adjustments, she donned me on her wedding day. She carried carnations, the soft apricot-colored kind, sprinkled with baby's breath. My train trailed behind her down the aisle, sweeping up the rose petals that had been dropped by a pair of flower girls in matching baby blue dresses. After the wedding, I was lovingly wrapped in tissue paper and put away in a fancy box. At first, I listened in on their lives. Family gatherings, laughter, tears, the arrival of first a dog, then children, After a while, I tuned out, giving in to the feeling of loneliness and abandonment that had been nagging at me for some time. Finally, one day, I felt the box move. I waited perfectly still as the lid of the box was slowly lifted off and the tissue paper carefully peeled back. There, peeking down at me, was a young woman with long, dark hair. I recognized her right away. She looked very much like her mother. She gingerly lifted me out of the box and held me up. Next to her stood her mother. She looked much different than on her wedding day. Strands of silver decorated her hair, and the corners of her eyes creased when she smiled. She was just as beautiful as the last time we were together. I was carted off to the seamstress. My sleeves were removed and my neckline lowered. A few of my missing pearls were replaced, and my hem was shortened so it would no longer trail on the ground when the bride walked the aisle. When the big day came, the girl had her long, dark hair pinned up in a fancy twist, and she carried white and pink lilies. A long lace veil trailed down her back, laying delicately against my row of satin-covered buttons. Once the wedding was over, back into the box I went. I knew the drill now. I spent the first few weeks reminiscing about the 2 weddings and wondering what would happen next. Then the box moved again. Had it been years already? This time, a man was staring back at me. I recognized him from the wedding. His eyes looked sad. I felt his tears fall and soak into my satin. I could feel his heavy heart. He put the lid back on the box, and I felt myself being carried away. The next time the lid was removed, I was in a shop. An older woman, her gray hair curled on top of her head, scrutinized every inch of my fabric through her tiny glasses. She wore a name tag that read, "Vera's Vintage," with the name Vera spelled out underneath. The woman carefully placed me on a mannequin and carried me to the window. What joy it was to bask in the daylight, to watch people on the street walk back and forth, colorful shopping bags in hand. It amazed me how different everyone looked. Clothed in bright patterns, women with short hair, men with long hair, even the cars came in all different colors. The world had changed completely since I had last been out of the box. One day, a young blonde woman with a pixie haircut and large hoop earrings stopped in front of the window to look at me. I heard the chime of the doorbell as she entered the shop. Next thing I knew, I was being removed from the mannequin and packed into yet another box that, in turn, was placed into a paper bag, which the blonde woman happily carried on her arm as she left the shop. She wasted no time taking me out of the box and getting to work. The first thing she did was cut me down to nearly half my length. She used the fabric from the bottom part of my skirt to make sleeves and add back to my neckline. She added some feathers to the cuffs and the bottom of my now much shorter hem. When she was finally finished, she put me on and stepped in front of a mirror. I couldn't believe what had happened. I was unrecognizable. I instantly wondered what would the woman think, the very first one who collected my parts and put me together. This time there was no aisle to walk down. The wedding was outside with only a handful of people. The blonde woman did not carry flowers. This time, I got to attend the reception. There was live music and laughter, food and drink. I got a stain on my sleeve from a stray cherry that fell off the Black Forest cake. After the wedding, I was placed on a hanger and tucked at the back of a long closet. I watched as the other clothes came and went over the years. First, the short dresses gave way to long dresses, then to dresses with shoulder pads and wild, angular patterns. Then one day, the woman grabbed all the clothes and tucked them into a suitcase, packed her shoes in a box, gathered her jewelry, books, and trinkets, and walked out the door. I stayed at the back of the closet, left behind once again. What happened? Eventually, the man from the wedding came by and brought me outside. He slipped my hanger onto a clothing rack where I got blown in the soft summer breeze. People came and went, leaving with various household items, books, trinkets, the things the woman had left behind. The man seemed happy to see the items leaving with other people. Finally, a woman with chin-length black hair took me off the rack. She gave the man some money, then placed me delicately on the back seat of her car, and we drove away. I found myself brought once again to a seamstress. The woman with the black hair asked to have a wide blue sash added to my waist, with a large bow at the back. The feather trim was removed from my cuffs and hem, and lace added to my hemline, so I found myself once again to be a full-length dress, though sheer on the bottom half. This time, the wedding was quite large. Standing in front of the woman with the black hair was another woman in a finely tailored white suit, its lapels made of satin similar to mine. They looked incredibly happy. I was left hanging on the back of a dressing room door while they went to the reception, a plastic bag draped over me. And eventually I was tucked to the back of yet another closet when they got home. I wondered then, in those long stretches of time when I was not needed, whatever became of my missing parts, the parts that had been cut off, refashioned, discarded. I tried to see if perhaps I could feel them, those parts of me somewhere out there in the world. But no. Several years later, the woman who had donned the white suit pulled me off the hanger and shoved me roughly into a plastic bag. I heard muffled conversation about sparking joy as I felt myself being carted off once again. I eventually ended up dumped out on a table with piles and piles of other clothes. After going through some kind of sorting system, I got strung up onto a rather uncomfortable wobbly hanger and placed on a rack tightly sandwiched between another wedding dress and a peach-colored party dress. I spent weeks and weeks on that rack, watching the seasons change through the window at the far end of the huge, cluttered space. Winter gave way to spring, then summer, and finally the leaves started to change color. That's when the girl with the bright orange hair showed up. She unhooked my hanger from the rack and waved excitedly to her friend. They giggled and turned me over in their hands. I wondered if they would see my cherry stain and hang me back up. Abandon me. But no. They carried me to the checkout counter where I once again got shoved unceremoniously into a bag and took me home. That very night, the most bewildering thing occurred. The girl with the orange hair took a bottle of red liquid, drizzled it onto my neckline, and let it trickle down. I ended up with streaks of red down my front and back. I was slipped onto another hanger and hung up to dry. The following evening, the girl put me on, laced up some tall black boots, put on some ghastly makeup, and we went outside. Over and over she rang doorbells and was given candy. A strange ceremony indeed. No flowers, no guests. I was left very confused at the end of the night as I sat in a pile on the floor next to her boots and a handful of stray candy wrappers. The girl eventually rolled me into a ball and shoved me on the floor in the back corner of her closet. A few years later, I was pulled from my hiding space by a woman with auburn hair pulled back in a ponytail. The room that had housed the girl with the orange hair looked completely different. Her posters had been taken down and replaced with paintings of mountains and lakes. The small bed with its bedding haphazardly strewn on top had been replaced with a larger, perfectly made bed. As I was walked through the house, I saw photos on the walls of the woman who was carrying me, a man I'd never seen, and the girl with the orange hair looking far more grown up than the last time I'd seen her. The woman with the auburn hair took me outside and placed me in the center of a circle made of bricks. She added other items alongside me, more clothing, pieces of cardboard, sticks, wood, then walked away. I waited patiently as the day wore on, wondering what this strange assortment of objects was going to lead to. My answer came with the night and the strike of a match. Within a matter of minutes, I could feel my fabric singe as the flames melted my lace and licked at my frayed edges. I felt myself disintegrate as I burned, lifting into the night sky in a cloud of ash. I felt myself fall back to the ground, landing on the wildflowers, mixing with the dirt. How fitting that I should once again find myself in scattered pieces. I started out as satin, pearls, and thread, and I became a wedding dress.
That brings us to the end of this episode. We truly hope you've enjoyed this eerie tale touching on lifespans, life paths, and mortality. If you would like to hear more from Melissa, you can find her website at www.theskylarkbell.com and follow her on Instagram @theskylarkbell. All this information can also be found in the show's notes. If you have an original story that would send a chill down our spines and you would like to submit it for review, simply send it in to hauntedukfiction@hotmail.com. That's hauntedukfiction@hotmail.com. Until the next time, stay safe and take care.